Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Igor here, and today in this video I'm going to do a scripted guide to gluttony, what it is, what it means, what all your biles mean, what they do, a couple of examples that will really help you raise those first crucial points. And like I said, I'll probably make a let's play to go along with this, where I'm just going to walk around for about a half hour, and I'm going to gather some stuff, and I'm going to try and raise my actual stats so that you guys can see it in action, how it works, and the whole 9 yards. So we're going to start off with the scripted version, and then I'll do a let's play on it later on. So the first thing we're going to start off with, blood. And blood is the red bar, it's the top one, and blood is often considered to be a dump stat by many players, around 5 to 20 or so, because the stat is incredibly easy to get early on, because many forageables and forage-based recipes give blood as a primary attribute, and I'll get into the details of what I'm referring by primary later on. But furthermore, blood doesn't have any direct uses, so the benefits are actually somewhat hidden. Blood is lost when picking thorns, when failing to light a fire with a tinder drill, when taking direct damage in combat. So the difference between being able to actually solo a beaver compared to someone who can't early game is quite actually heavily influenced by your base health and ability to take a beating. So a 10 blood, 10 yellow bile character can't kill a beaver in a straight up fight because they do too much damage, but a 20 blood, 10 yellow bile can quite easily because he can take more of a beating. Now, by no means am I actually suggesting to pump any stat 10 above the others. Yet again, I'll explain that, later on. But the point stands that blood has its uses. PvP warriors can obviously see requirements for the stat, I'm sure. And then that brings us to phlegm. Phlegm is the white bar, it's the second one down, and phlegm is the workhorse stat of the four. This stat is actually drained when doing nearly every crafting action, like digging, building, chopping, crafting items, and that's only naming a few. It's also used by the run and wander movement modes, which are quite crucial at some points in time, and without phlegm, heavy-duty work like terraforming is nearly impossible to do in any timely manner. And for the warrior side of things, phlegm is required to bash down structures such as walls and claim defenses, and also it affects how much damage you do when destroying things like stumps and that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much that's all there is to phlegm. Now we're going to move on to yellow bile, and yellow bile is by far the most combat-oriented stat in the game, aside from perhaps blood. And yellow bile is directly responsible for your damage dealt with your various aggressive attacks, and is used in small amounts in some of the movement types, and most moves actually have a fairly small base damage, so pumping this number for hunting either creatures or pilgrims is definitely, it's definitely a must. So get that up and keep them all even. Like I said, I'll explain why in a little bit. Now, black bile, which is the last one, which is the black bar on the very bottom, now that one is an interesting stat. It's roughly equivalent to your state of mind, and activities like studying inspirationals will lower it. Now, this might seem small, but the speed of studying is directly proportional to the amount of black bile you have left out of your total. So basically, studying 1 black bile worth of inspirationals at 100 black bile will only drop you to 99% study rate. But with 10 black bile, it's a 10% reduction in study speed. So at low levels, basically what this all means is at low levels that you're going to be eating every minute or two, and quite actually significantly hampers your ability to study effectively. Black bile is also used when placing structures, and this can be quite draining in the case of long lines of fences or stone hedges, and some of the more costly buildings actually require a significant amount of black bile to place, like the windmill, which I'm pretty sure takes about 8 black bile just to place it. Now, in the current combat system, only deer and bears are actually able to cast an ability that drains black bile. And since hitting 0 in any of your stats is a KO, this obviously puts requirements for black bile minimums in order to fight these creatures one-on-one. Furthermore, black bile is the base value for raiders to use when committing crimes. All crime actions against a claim have black bile costs, and you can see this if you watch my video on basically doing criminal acts and trespassing in somebody's land. But even if the claim has defenses like the brazier, the torch post that drain black bile, he's actually draining black bile on top of the normal black bile drain just for trespassing. So this naturally means that raiders will not be combat weakened when dealing with a claim, but they can get KO'd quite easily if they make a mistake or get delayed while under fire from braziers or torch posts. So now that we've covered the humors and what they do and what they mean, we're going to get on to the exciting part, which is talking about gluttony mode. Now, gluttony mode is activated when you fill all your humor bars to full, or the ball, whichever one you use, the diamond, and then you click on the humors after they have a green light around them. Now at this point you will get the almighty fork of feasting as a cursor and may commence to gobble food to your heart's desire. Now food may be eaten from an inventory or from an open container, but remember, right clicking will break the feast mode, so if you're going to eat from a container, make sure you have it open first. So before we get into it, first I'm going to talk about the complicated bit, and each food has 4 different events in gluttony mode. Salt, which is indicated by the color red, mercury, which is indicated by the color green, sulfur, indicated by the color blue, and lead, indicated by the color yellow. These events correspond with the elemental purities. So looking at a witch's hat, the mercury event, for example, which is the second one down, and that's the green line, gives you 4 blood, which is the first row, 0 phlegm, which is the second row, 0 yellow bile, which is the third row, and 9 in black bile, which is the fourth row. The event that you get is based on the purity of the item. As you can see here, all 4 event colors are at 25%, so you have a 25% chance to get one of the 4 events. Unfortunately, the salt or red event gives you 0 in everything, but the overall amount of black bile you get and everything else makes it worth it. Now when food is consumed, it has a static or set amount of time it takes to consume. And this is very important because some foods are very slow to eat. Many meats actually fall into this category, which a couple examples are cooked meat and plant steaks. And why is this relevant? Because as you feast, the gluttony points you earn are steadily drained away. As time passes, a variance penalty to the right of the humor's ball, or the bars, whichever one you're using, will start to tick upwards. Now the higher the variance penalty, the faster your points will be drained. So it's quite easy when eating just one food type to get to a spot where gluttony points are drained faster than they can be produced by eating food. And it's this exact reason why eating foods that tick slowly are pretty much useless in this case. Each different or unique piece of food that you eat pushes the variance penalty down by 1 point. So roasted bear cuts and roasted rabbit cuts are both considered unique, for example, as are bear steaks and bear cuts. So how does this earn you more humors, you might be asking? Well, if you manage to get enough points to fill the bar for one humor type, you will earn a point of humors for that particular category. How many points you need to earn is equal to that of your highest bile. So if you have 5, 5, 5, 10, you're going to actually have to get 10 in anything just to tick a point. Even if it's one of the 5s, you're going to have to get 10 points just to tick up a 5. So right here, this is why I suggested not raising them too far above the others. Now at first, there's little harm in raising humors 5 points at a time, or in the early 5 to 10 points, but until you get to the 20 to 30 mark, and after that it becomes much more difficult to raise the stats and much more care should be taken. So we're going to bring this back to the beginning for all the newer pilgrims out there who just started the game, how you get those first crucial points of humors, how to make your life easy, and I'm going to cover that right now. Now black bile is always my first target since it lets you skill up more quickly. It affects the speed at which you study. So getting those initial first foraging skills are way easier to do. So to do this, just simply keep 10 spaces free in your inventory and wander between berry bush to berry bush until it's full of blackberries. Now when you can, when all your humors are full, just enter the gluttony mode and feast and just eat them all until you have 10 black bile. Now at this stage, advanced movement modes are just too much drain on your humors to really use, except maybe foraging, which doesn't use a whole lot, so a good target to aim for next is phlegm. Now phlegm, however, is not an easy stat to get as a beginner, because mainly the only actual things that level it up effectively are milkweed roots and wild garlic. So those are the really only singly foraged items in the game that give phlegm reliably. The real keys to unlocking easy phlegm foods is the ability to hunt rabbits, as roasted rabbit cuts and steaks are excellent for beginner phlegm foods. Or you could get the flowers and berries skill, but the flowers and berries skill unlocks the wild salad recipe, which is incredibly reliable for phlegm gains. Now, I would suggest aiming for rabbits if you have an option, mainly because grinding for flowers and berries at that stage in the game is fairly difficult compared to getting small game hunting and field dressing. So, now that we've eaten some black bile and phlegm food, it's time to raise our blood and yellow bile. And as I said, blood should be an easy one because berries on a straw are excellent reliable for blood gains at least up to level 10 points. Now lavender bluets also give blood quite often when eaten on their own with a hint of yellow bile, but they have a much more important use for raising said yellow bile. The only good pure yellow bile food early game is beaver steaks, and those are nearly impossible to acquire with the stats that your character would have right now. Your other option is wort-baked wort bites, but those are also a pain to make and serious overkill for a character with 5 yellow bile. So we're moving up the food chain into what we call humor diets. Now, since there's no easy to make food that give us yellow bile aside from the food of fish in the reeds, which you get from fishing, but be warned, that has a chance to give black bile as well. But if you want a 100% way to get yellow bile, we're just going to have to use 2 foods that give us yellow bile. Now, if lavender bluets are eaten alone, they will give you both blood and a little bit of yellow bile. Now, if shrooms on a stick are eaten alone, which you unlock the ability to craft those after you get mushroom hunting, which should be bought pretty early on, they will give you no blood and no phlegm, but if you eat 1 shroom on a stick and 1 or more bluets, you will gain 100% yellow bile each time. The reason being are the side attributes for the food that each one gives. For the bluets, it gives more blood than yellow bile, but not by much. For shrooms on a stick, it gives yellow bile and black bile in roughly equal amounts as an average. But when we put them together, you get 2 doses of yellow bile, 1 dose of blood, and 1 dose of black bile. The net result is that neither blood or black bile are able to fill their bars, but the yellow bile can without any competition. And voila, we have perfect yellow bile gains from 2 foods that would give yellow bile an average 25% of the time if they were eaten at eaten one at a time instead. Now, personally, I still use this combination at 30 plus biles to get yellow bile effectively, so it actually is really quite useful, and once you figure it out, once you do it, it becomes a lot easier. Now, at this point, I think you have enough information to start looking at food combinations yourself. Remember to look for foods that give the same gluttony point type across all events, and preferably the higher the better, of course. Now, food combinations get easier as you go up in points, since you can spread out the other stat gains into multiple categories very easily. Now, for example, when combining foods, something to definitely watch out for is a fish in the reeds and shrooms on a stick are actually a bad yellow bile combination, for example, since both give yellow bile and black bile. But if they are but 2 of 6 recipes you're eating, likely it's not going to be a huge issue. Now, also remember that the higher your humors, the more different recipes you should be using, as the variance penalty will become a very big issue. Any recipes giving towards the humor you want and taking away the variance penalty are going to be very useful to you. And that should be a good start for you to start beginning to understand gluttony. And one of the only things that I could say is, if you have to, watch this video a couple of times, go out there, do it yourself, and really the easiest way to understand it is to go out and aim for one stat. Aim for a phlegm tick or aim for a yellow bile tick, and once you aim for something and you get what you wanted, it becomes a lot easier because then you really start figuring it out. But in the meantime, I do want to thank 7less for letting me use his guide as somewhat of a script, and I did leave a couple of parts out. I did want to let you guys know about that. I did leave a couple of parts out because some of it was just really technical for the new players out there, and I wanted to avoid as much confusion as possible, so I did leave a couple of parts out. So if you can, click the link down below. It's the link right to his guide. Check it out. It's an amazing guide for all the new players out there, and I want to thank him again for letting me use that. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.